The best horror movies don't disappear when the credits roll. They follow you home, you recommend them to your friends, you search for discussions online, you replay scenes in your head trying to understand why they affected you so much. They're the kind of films that refuse to leave your mind, lingering long after you've finished even watching them. While plenty of horror movies do succeed at frightening audiences for a couple of hours, only a select few become genuine cultural conversations. Movies people feel compelled to share, analyze, and revisit. That's exactly what has happened with Obsession, a film that seemingly came out of nowhere before captivating audiences through word of mouth. Viewers weren't simply calling it one of the year's best horror movies, they were encouraging everyone they knew to go and see it, filling social media with recommendations, theories, and discussions. For a low-budget film made by a YouTuber, that kind of response is extraordinarily rare. Somehow, Obsession managed to cut through the noise of blockbuster releases and establish itself as one of the year's most talked about obsessions. People weren't just recommending Obsession, they were insisting their friends go and watch it. Social media quickly filled with spoiler-free reactions, passionate recommendations, and endless discussions online from viewers who couldn't stop thinking about what they'd just seen. That is an incredibly rare achievement for any horror film. So before we can talk about how Obsession became one of the year's biggest horror success stories, we first have to answer a much simpler question. Why did audiences become so attached to it in the first place? After all, the horror genre is one of the most oversaturated genres in modern cinema. Every year, dozens upon dozens of horror films are released, all hoping to become the next breakout success. Some receive praise from critics, others perform well financially, and many simply disappear a few weeks after release, quickly replaced by the next big theatrical event. It takes something truly special for a horror film to break away from that cycle and establish itself through genuine word of mouth. That's exactly what Obsession managed to accomplish. It quickly evolved beyond being another independent horror release and became a genuine conversation piece, with audiences eager to share the experience rather than simply talk about individual scenes. That kind of enthusiasm can't be manufactured through an expensive marketing campaign. It can only happen when the film genuinely connects with people, and Obsession does so by understanding that most effective horror isn't always about monsters or violence. It's about taking an emotion we can already understand and sympathize with and slowly begin transforming it into something deeply unsettling. That emotional connection begins with one incredibly simple question. What if the person you loved so strongly suddenly loved you back? It's a fantasy that almost everyone has imagined at some point in their lives. Whether it's a childhood crush, an unrequited romance, or simply wondering how life could have been different, there's something almost universally relatable about wishing another person could return how you feel. Rather than opening with an elaborate supernatural mythology or an outlandish horror concept, Obsession grounds itself in one of the most human desires imaginable. That immediately places the audience alongside Bear instead of judging him from a distance. We understand why he makes the wish, because in isolation the desire itself isn't evil. It's lonely, it's vulnerable, it's painfully human. That emotional foundation becomes the film's greatest strength because it refuses to paint its protagonist as a monster before he's earned our sympathy. Instead, it asks us to empathize with his longing, allowing us to emotionally invest in his decision before gradually forcing us to confront the horrifying consequences that follow. What follows is where Obsession truly distinguishes itself from so many modern horror movies. Rather than constantly chasing louder scares or increasingly shocking moments, the film understands that discomfort is often far more effective than outright terror. Every interaction between Bear and Nikki carries a subtle sense that something has shifted. Conversations become increasingly unnatural. Moments that would naturally or normally be interpreted as romantic begin to feel invasive, and simple gestures of affection gradually transform into acts of suffocation. The horror isn't generated because the audience is waiting for something to jump out from the darkness. It's generated because every scene creates an overwhelming feeling that something fundamental has become deeply wrong. That emotional unease is only possible because of the performances. Bear remains sympathetic throughout much of the story, despite the catastrophic mistake he's made, while Nikki's transformation never feels like a sudden personality change designed purely for shock value. Instead, it unfolds with enough restraint that every escalation feels believable within the film's reality. Perhaps that's the biggest reason audiences couldn't stop talking about Obsession after the credits rolled. The film doesn't simply leave viewers remembering individual scares or shocking moments, it leaves them thinking about the ideas beneath them. It raises uncomfortable questions about love, loneliness, dependency, control, and whether genuine affection can ever exist without freedom of choice. Those ideas don't disappear once the story ends. Instead, they encourage discussion because they're rooted in emotions that exist outside the film itself. Viewers leave the cinema debating not only what happened, but what the story was actually trying to say. That is an incredibly difficult achievement for any horror movie because genuine discussion is almost always more valuable than temporary shock. Nobody expected one of the year's most talked about horror films to come from a YouTuber. Before audiences even stepped into the cinema, many had already formed assumptions based solely on the name attached to the project. Kari Barker was primarily known as a YouTuber, and while YouTube has become an incredible platform for developing filmmakers, there's still a lingering stigma surrounding creators making the jump to feature-length cinema. Too often, YouTuber movie is associated with amateur filmmaking, limited ambitions, or projects exist purely to capitalize on an existing brand or audience. As a result, expectations surrounding Obsession were understandably cautious. People expected something competent at best, but very few expected a film that would end up competing with, and in many cases surpassing, the work of far more experienced Hollywood filmmakers. That's exactly what made the film's reception so fascinating. The conversation very quickly shifted away from "it's good for a YouTuber movie" to simply "it's a great horror movie." In many ways, that may be the highest compliment the film could have ever received, because audiences stopped viewing it through the lens of its creator's background and instead judged it on its own merits. What makes that achievement even more impressive is that Obsession never really feels like it's trying to prove itself. There's no sense of the film constantly reminding you that it was made independently or on a smaller budget. Instead, it carries itself with a confidence that's immediately apparent from its opening scenes. The cinematography is polished without feeling artificial, making clever use of framing, lighting, and composition to create an atmosphere that's both intimate and unsettling. Every shot feels purposeful, with the camera often lingering just long enough to heighten the discomfort without drawing unnecessary attention to itself. The editing follows that same philosophy, allowing scenes to breathe while maintaining constant feeling that something is quietly spiraling out of control. Rather than relying on flashy techniques or expensive spectacle, the filmmaking constantly and consistently serves the story, proving that thoughtful creative decisions can be every bit as impactful as a blockbuster-sized budget. That same confidence extends to the performances, which ultimately become the emotional backbone of the entire film. Horror only works when audiences believe the people at the center of it, and Obsession succeeds because its characters feel authentic long before the supernatural elements begin to dominate the narrative. The chemistry between the cast gives every interaction a sense of sincerity, making the relationships feel believable enough that viewers become emotionally invested before those relationships begin to unravel. As the story progresses, each performance subtly evolves alongside the escalating tension, ensuring that the horror always feels rooted in genuine emotion rather than exaggerated reactions. Instead of relying on melodrama or over-the-top theatrics, the actors approached the material with restraint, allowing even the smallest changes in behavior to become deeply unsettling. It's this grounded kind of approach that transforms the film's central concept from an intriguing premise into a genuinely affecting tragedy. Perhaps that's why Obsession became such an important milestone, not only for Kari Barker, but for independent filmmaking as a whole. It demonstrated that compelling storytelling, thoughtful direction, and genuinely artistic vision can resonate just as strongly as the biggest studio productions when they're executed with confidence and purpose. Audiences didn't embrace the film because they wanted to support a YouTuber making movies. They embraced it because by the time the film had ended, they had already forgotten about that distinction. all that mattered was that they'd experienced a horror film that lingered in their minds long after it ended. In an industry where massive marketing budgets and established franchises often dominate the conversations, Obsession proved that a great idea supported by exceptional filmmaking and authentic performances can still break through the noise. That's an achievement worthy of recognition, and it's exactly why the film's success feels so significant. At first glance, Obsession's success feels almost impossible to explain. A low-budget horror film made by a YouTuber shouldn't have been competing with some of the biggest studio releases of this year, let alone becoming one of the film's audiences were most eager to recommend to others. Yet that's exactly what happened. Not because it had the largest marketing campaign or the biggest stars attached to it, but because it understood something far more important. The best horror movies don't just scare people, they make them feel something they can't easily shake off. They leave audiences thinking, discussing, and revisiting them long after the credits have begun. That's what makes Obsession so special. Beneath its supernatural premise is a story built on deeply human emotions, brought to life through confident filmmaking, compelling performances, and a clear creative vision that never loses sight of what truly matters. Curry Barker didn't become one of the year's biggest horror success stories simply because he proved a YouTuber could make a great movie. He succeeded because he made a great movie, full stop. The YouTuber label may have sparked curiosity initially, but it was the film itself that earned audiences' admiration. In a genre crowded with sequels, reboots, and films that are often forgotten almost as quickly as they are released, Obsession accomplished something far rarer. It became a movie people genuinely wanted to share with others, one that sparked conversations, inspired recommendations, and lingered in the minds of those who experienced it. And when a horror film can do all of that, perhaps there's no better way to describe it than this. Obsession truly became everyone's movie obsession.